In this tutorial, we're going to be showing you everything you need to know to create this beautiful wedding cake. We're going to be working with cutting and filling our layers. We're also going to show you how to create the perfect messy wedding cake look.
And we're going to help complement that look with beautiful fresh flowers to give you that garden feel, but more to the antique style of it that complements.
Yes, so it's going to be a full-on tutorial covering both cake and flowers. The first thing that we're going to do is take all of our cakes that we've baked and cooled out of the fridge, and we're going to cut our layers into them. So first thing we do is, I've got them wrapped up. I want to keep this wrapping on it on the bottom, mainly just so that I can move it around and then wrap it back up again, because we are going to pop them into the fridge right after this step. We'll take our ruler, place it up to the top there, mark it at the 1 inch, and just make a little incision. You're not looking to cut too much into the cake, you're just looking to make a little bit of a mark for yourself as a guide. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just find where those marks are and just start to line them up. It's just basically to score the cake all the way around. Okay, so now that we're all the way through, we're going to continue with our knife straight through the centre and constantly looking over and just making sure that we are staying on track. Okay, and you can start to feel that it's loosened. Okay, all right. We're going to wrap those up and keep them for about half an hour. During that time we'll do our 8 and our 10 inch to get them all ready, but we just want them to become nice and firm before we start applying our fillings. Now our cakes have been setting up in the fridge for about half an hour. The next step that we're going to do with each of our tiers is to place them onto a board and fill our cake layers. Now with this particular design, we are wanting to have this cake rest on a cake stand. So we want to make sure that there's no larger cake board that we're working with. That's why I've chosen, we're going to put on the bottom of this cake an MDF 10-inch round so that it matches exactly with the cake that we're working with. When we go to do our other tiers, we don't need it to be this sturdy. We can go for something like a cardboard one that we use in most of our tutorials. So for our 6 and our 8 inch, we'll be working with these, but for our 10, just so that you can put it safely and securely onto a cake stand, we're going to work with something a bit more substantial. Now to attach the cake to this plate, this board itself, because I'm using our sweet buttercream recipe that you can find on the website, it is crusting, so I can use that and it will stay put. If you're transiting this quite a long distance, or you're working with, say, a Swiss meringue buttercream or something that doesn't crust, then I would go ahead and use either a royal icing or a white chocolate ganache. Both of those set up really, really firm and it'll be a lot more secure. We're just going to place some of it onto our board, scrape it all on here, and then I'm going to place a little bit onto the top of our cake, which is now going to become our bottom. Not a huge amount, just to help it to adhere. Okay, so now we can either pick up our cake, or if it's a little bit more flimsy than this, you can always use the board and take it to the cake itself. So once that's down, we're going to take some of our buttercream, and we're basically working in a sideward motion, building up one section at a time. You'll notice I didn't grab a huge amount of it and just plop it into the center. I'm working in a section here. So you can see how when I'm working with just a small area, you can actually see how thick you're making your buttercream, and that's a really good thing because you can make sure that, for one, it's even, but also that you're giving your guests or the people that are eating the cake a nice amount of frosting in between the layers. You don't want just a really skim coat on there. So as we work our way around, we're going to continue to just check and make sure that it's staying nice and even. Okay, so we just need a little bit more here. You can see that it's not quite high enough. And then we've got our section in the middle. So now we can go around and actually notice and see if it's all nice and level. Then we can fill that in, going all the way out to the edges of that hole. So now we can take our next layer. I'm just going to rest it down really gently. Before I press down, I'm going to use my index fingers and just line up in 4 spots and make sure that it's staying nice and straight. So come back with your spatula. Now, if you're going to be using this for the exterior as well, make sure you don't put any of these crumbs back into it. You can either wipe them away or you can put them right out on the edge where they're going to get wiped away anyway. Get rid of all of that. Now we'll allow that to rest again for another 30 minutes. And we'll continue on with our 6 and our 8 with our cardboard cake plates. Our cakes are now ready for the next step, which is to shave down the sides. This is a really important step in terms of the overall look of the cake, both the outside, but most importantly for weddings, the inside of the cake. When it's plated for each guest, you don't want to have the sides of the cake having like a ripple effect. We want to get rid of all of that so it's nice and flawless. So we're going to take our sharp bread knife and some parchment or wax paper, baking paper, it's called all different names depending on where you are, and all we're going to do is just take the very, very edges off. So we're going to start just by at the very, very top, trying to keep your knife nice and straight, and you'll notice that in some spots you'll take off a lot and in some spots you'll take off hardly anything. So we just pick this up, put our parchment paper, flip, just place it down and then remove your fingers. And basically what we're going to do is rest our knife just underneath the board. We don't want to use the board as a gauge because it is too large. So we're just going to tuck the knife in just underneath and again work our way down. And you just might find that mostly it's just that very, very edge lip there that it will chop off of that top layer. Alright, we're ready to do our first coat on the outside of our cake. We're going to start with a crumb coat, and it's basically exactly what the name is. You are locking in the crumbs on the cake so that our final layer and second coat of icing doesn't get any of those crumbs in it whatsoever. So we're going to start with, we've got a spatula, a couple of scrapers. The big one is going to be to cover the whole surface of the top of the cake. If you don't have one of those, that's okay, you can still use the small one. The crumb coat is really not about being perfect, it's not really about what it looks like. You're still going to see the colour of the cake showing through, that's fine. It's just there to lock in those crumbs. So I've got some of our buttercream icing. If you are going to be tinting this at all to make a slightly different shade for your cake design, go ahead and add your colour now, because this crumb coat, while it won't be seen, it's still going to be rubbed against as we do our next coat, so we want to be consistent with our colourings. So we're going to take our spatula and just apply it to the cake, working our way all the way to the bottom. Now, if you were just doing one cake, what I would tend to do is probably cover about half of the cake and then begin scraping so that we can use the excess that we've accumulated for the rest of the cake. That way we're not constantly digging into fresh icing that will then have to be thrown away. Okay, it's time to start scraping it back off again. So I'm choosing to use a metal scraper. I like it because it keeps me nice and straight by having this handle section that's attached, so I can't dig into the top of the cake, which is a really common thing. So if your cakes have a bit of a tenting effect to them, it might just be that you're digging in your top a little bit much. So we're going to come along, and firstly I'm just going to make sure that I get everything off the bottom so that we can see that board. Now we're going to come up on the board just a little bit so that we can scrape the actual cake itself. Now, working on the top, there isn't a lot, but there is a little bit of a raised up section. I'm going to drag that in to the centre of the cake. And then take some of that icing that we had that already had a little bit of crumbs in it, and just working our way out to the very edge. Okay, so again, I'm just scraping over to get most of it off, and then I'm going to take our large, this was actually a paint scraper. It's been sterilised before we ever used it, but it is a great tool. Sometimes cake tools aren't necessarily ones that you can buy at the cake store, but they're just ones that you find that work for you. So we love this because it's nice and wide, and we can drag it over the entire surface. And the last thing that we're going to do is just do another whip around, and the only reason for this is so that all of those little fuzzy bits are poking straight back up again. That way we can come back with a knife and easily trim them off. If we keep them coming out, it can be a lot more challenging. So just around, not looking to take any more off necessarily, we're just looking to lift that up. So now that we've got this, we're going to let this set in the fridge for around half an hour to an hour. We're going to work on our other tiers during that time, so you will still be busy, but we just want this to crust up completely before we move on to doing a smooth and then a little more roughed up texture. Our next step is to take all of this excess that's raised up and just chop it off with a sharp knife. That will just give us a nice surface to work on for our second coat. Okay, so we're going to take some more of our buttercream and we're going to build it out until we reach the board. So we're just going to come along, nice big thick amounts. Again, we're not worrying too much about what it looks like. We just want to make sure it covers over the board and goes up nice and straight. So always making sure we put a reasonable amount on the top. All right, and now what we're going to do is actually smooth it all out. I know that it's looking quite similar to what our inspiration is already, but it's a bit of a challenge to know exactly how straight up and down the cake is. So whilst you can do just this as you finish and be done with it, we really want to take it to another step and just make sure that we're maintaining that before we work on the actual texturing. So we're going to come back around and we're going to pull it back again to where the board is. We just want to go around, just keeping it nice and straight. So the next step that we're going to do is pull all of this in towards the centre like we did last time and work on getting our top to have a nice solid coating. So drag all of our excess in. And in this case, we're not looking for it to be too perfect because we are going to mess it up again. We're just making sure there's no high point, particularly in the centre. Okay. So we're going to come along, just raise up that section. Now we're going to take a bit more of our icing. We're actually going to start to rough it up a little bit more. Now that we know where straight is, we just want to apply a little bit to our top section. And if we're using our scraper here, we know that it's staying nice and level. So that's got most of that covered now. I'm just going to clean off the spatula and we're going to use that just to make some markings into the cake. Working around. You don't want anything to be in a big line. So we're just going to keep stopping and starting in random spots. But you can see how just having that extra bit of padding has enabled us to be able to pull and drag a little bit off without going too deeply into the cake. There we go, so all the way around. Now I'm going to choose to do just some larger patches over the top using our spatula in this angle, just so we can get some larger strokes. We don't want every stroke to be tiny little thin ones going around the cake. So we're just going to come back along and do some larger ones. So now what we're going to do is just pull this in a little bit, and then on the edges I'm going to go ahead and do that same little brush strokes with our spatula. So I've got everything out that I need to stack. We're going to go ahead and pre-dowel our bottom two tiers and just get those ready so that when we get them out of the fridge later on, when they're set, we'll be able to stack it up really easily and we don't have to worry about making a mess. Also, even though it is a crusting buttercream, it will stay nice and cold for only a short time to work with it. So we want to try and make that process really quick. So I've got some wooden dowels, a graphite pencil, just some paper towels just to try and wipe off the excess cake, and I'm using some conduit cutters to be able to cut our dowels. So just come along about 2 inches away. We're going to make 4 marks and then one just off centre. So we're going to press this down right until we reach the end, give it a twist to bring it back up again, and we're going to do all 5 of our dowel spots before we measure. Okay, so do one last clean, and then what we're going to do is take that centre hole and make sure that there isn't any crumbs there. Press it all the way down, this time with the flat side going down instead of the pointed side. And we're just going to mark where the buttercream is. Give it a little twist again. Okay, so with the conduit cutters, what we're going to do is line it up, pressing the top section of the conduit cutter just below our mark, holding onto both sides and just nice and firmly breaking through. Now to line them up, I use the side of my bench so that I can thread it through, line it up, and then get rid of the excess. Again, using the same one every time, not replacing it with a new one. So I'm just going to line these up and make sure that they're all pretty much level, and then we're going to place them into our little dowel spots. There. Okay, so now what we're going to do is let them set up a good half an hour or so in the fridge. That way we'll be able to touch them and manhandle them a little bit more without affecting our finish. And then we'll finish off with our large dowel. We're up to the fun part. We're finally going to see our creation come together. So we've got all of our cakes out, just out of the fridge. They're nice and cold. You can see that I can touch them. They're not denting at all. We're going to take those. We've got a big centre rod or a dowel that we're going to be running through so that you can transit this around. But for the most part, we've got all of our dowels done in the last stage. So what we're going to do now is basically take a little bit of extra buttercream. We're just going to cover up these little dowel spots and just a section of fresh stuff on top so that it will adhere our next tier. Just a little bit to cover. Stacking is a really easy step. Once you've got the dowels in, you're halfway there. So again, keeping it nice and flat. All right, now using a spatula, we're just going to slide under our cake. Now we're just going to eyeball where it goes. We know we have about 1 inch on every side, but we can always move it forward a little bit if we need to. So we're just going to stay back a bit, use our spatula and slowly lower it down, and then pull your spatula out. And we're just going to give it a little push forward and a push to the side. Okay, now we can grab a tape measure. I tend to use a soft one so that I don't dent the cake at all. We're just going to come around And we've got just barely over 1 inch there. And we have not quite 1 inch there, so we're just going to give it a little bit of a push back. We've gone a touch too far. And that's right on the 1 inch. There. All right, so now we've got that. We can press down a little bit where the dowels are, just to make sure that it's staying. We're going to do the whole thing again. Picking up our cake. Have a bit of a look. We can always push it forward a bit. Taking our spatula, tuck it underneath and release. So now we take the large dowel that we have sharpened it with a blade knife just to make it a nice pointy end, so that'll actually go through all of these cake boards as well as the cake. We're going to eyeball where the height needs to be at. So I'm just going to come along and go a little bit less than our actual cakes. And we're just going to work our way down, checking ourselves to make sure it's staying nice and straight on the sides as well, until we reach our first board. Now we're going to take a hammer. Now this bit gets a little bit scary when people look at it, but it has no impact on the cake at all. We just need to get through that board. So we're going to hammer that until we reach the next cake. And then we can push down and we'll reach our next board down on our second tier. Same process again, making sure that it's staying nice and centered. Okay, now that we're a little bit closer, we're going to use this just to countersink it in a little bit. We've cut our large dowel, so it's just a little bit shorter than our cake. So we've got right on top, just a couple more, and that way it's countersunk in. All we need to do at this stage is take a little bit of our icing and just patch that hole. And that's it. It's all locked in together. It's very secure. You can see now though that we've got our boards exposed a little bit as we've been putting them on each one. There's a little bit of spacing. I'm going to take either, you can do a spatula, or I'm going to use a piping bag and just fill in around there, and then we'll just messy it up a little bit as well. So piping bag, I've got a coupler. I'm using a number 7 tip. You could probably use anything from a 5 to a 7 would be great for this. I've got some little scissors, and I'm going to start by chopping off the top of our piping bag. Not too much. Place the first section of our coupler in. And you can see that that's a nice size. It's gone all the way to the top. Place our tip on, and then the rest of our coupler, screwing that on tightly. Just make a C curve in your hand so that you can scoop it in like a funnel. So coming along, squeezing. You can see that's just covering the board. It's basically puttying it. Come around and just smooth it in to start with. Just blending it. So doing some of our strokes. And that's it. All right, so what we're going to do now is place it onto our beautiful cake stand and get ready for the most important part of the final decoration, which is the flowers. Okay, so now taking our cake, we're going to take a large spatula and just gently touch our cake. Wedge that underneath. We're lifting up. And basically we're acting as though this is a tier, so we want to make sure that there's equal spacing on all of the sides. So we're going to lift. These cakes can be a little bit heavy. Just drop it down. Again, you're looking to have a little bit extra at the front because you can always push it forward. Release. Taking your spatula and just allow it to drop. And while the spatula's there, you can see I've got my spatula poking out here. We're going to manipulate and move it into the position that we're happy with. So releasing, we're just going to pull out our spatula and then we'll be ready to decorate it. So now that our cake is complete, we've put it on a beautiful traditional but a little bit more rustic stand. We're going to do the same thing with the flowers. We want to go for something that's a little bit more traditional and a nice full posy on top. And to help us out with that, Darlene's going to show us all that we need to know with our flowers.
I've chosen today a few old-fashioned type of flowers to complement this cake. One being the hydrangea. We've also chosen an antique rose, which complements the colour as well. Nothing too bright, just keep it soft and beautiful. And a very favourite for many people is the David Austin. So we've chosen a peach just to bring a little bit of depth of colour into these flowers today.
I think the peach ones are probably one of the most stunning flowers that we've got in season so far this year.
And different seasons you may choose different flowers to complement
absolutely
the look.
Yeah. So how do we start wiring? How do we work with them?
First of all, we're going to show you a hydrangea. Now, I've pre-wired some ready to go, but I'm going to show you with the hydrangea, we've cut it off very close to the bottom of the flowerets. And we're going to use a 24 gauge wire, which I've also pre-cut, so you can cut them basically to roughly this length. We're going to feed it through two of the flowerets and pull it back with both fingers. So you have, it's a little bit tricky, but you'll get used to the feel of it. So you're creating a false stem. And then we're going to take another one of the same, because there's a little bit of weight in this flower, so it needs to be balanced. And
it's a big flower.
Needs to be kept.
And hydrangea stems, you can't use those stems, can you? Because they're so
they're very thick.
And the heads are often, say, double that size.
Exactly.
And so we'll just sort of swamp the rest of our flowers.
And because we're going to use our flower vial, we only have a limited room for stems into it. So
yes, we want to be able to fit the other flowers, our roses and our David Austins in there.
So we're actually going to parafilm through these two wires so we can pull it all together. Again, it's just a little bit tricky grabbing to the top, but once you've got that first piece around, I'm making that very hard.
And parafilm's very commonly used in sugar flowers as well. We use floral tape that isn't quite as stretchy and it's a little bit more matte. But with fresh flowers, you tend to prefer the parafilm. Is it because it's a little bit
quite
stretchier?
Stretchy.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue to parafilm all the way down the stems of the hydrangea, stretching and pulling your parafilm and twirling your flower above to create that nice smooth effect all the way down. You'll notice that hydrangea head's quite heavy, but we don't want the wires to be much thicker than this, because then we won't be able to insert them into the top part of the cake. So once we have it all the way down, quite a clean line, I'm going to show you how to wire the antique rose, again using either a 22 or a 24 wire through the rose. So you feed it through the top part of the petal, straight through, pull it down together, put your parafilm stretched around the top of the rose and twirl.
And now you thread it through the petals themselves, so that they stay nice and
full, closed. We don't want them to open up fully, because a rose will continue to open, especially once it's out of water.
Yes.
And if it's open and it wilts, we don't want that to happen.
No, absolutely. We want to make sure they're nice and fresh.
We want them to look exactly like we've done them now. Now the David Austin's the last one. David Austins are very fragile to work with. The petals will fall off quite easily, so you need to be a little bit delicate with them. So you turn your David Austin upside down, and you pull either side of the petals and pull it back in so it closes the flower. We're only going to use a 24 gauge wire on this, and we're going to pull part of the green stamen that comes down. We're going to pull that back to either side, and we're going to feed it through from one side to the other, so we're actually holding these petals together. Pull it down and turn it upside down.
And see, if you've been working with sugar flowers, this is a radical difference between how you wire real flowers and how you wire sugar flowers.
So then we're going to again parafilm, stretching and pulling from the top of the flower all the way down the stem. You won't twirl this one quite as hard because it is quite fragile. So our next step, once we have them all wired, we're actually going to pick up our hydrangea, and rather than insert them, sorry Vanessa, we're going to actually insert your
vial.
vial.
Okay, so right in the centre, I'm just going to place that in, and it should pass really easily through the cake, and we just want it to be resting flush with the cake. So that's really simple and easy, and it just means that those wires aren't going into the food, and it also means that there's not multiple piercings all over the top. Everything is kept in one nice spot.
So to create a really nice soft feel for this cake, instead of actually placing the flowers individually onto the cake, I'm actually going to do a little handheld posy with the flowers themselves, and then we're going to place the whole flower onto the cake. So I'm going to work with my David Austins first, and I'm going to pick them due to size. From underneath, I'm going to separate slightly the flowerets of the hydrangea, and I'm going to place the David Austin into that. And we don't want to pull them down too far, because then you'll actually lose the effect of them, and it will pull them in nice and tight, we don't want that.
So you want your focal flowers to still be a little bit raised from
the rest.
Yeah, okay.
So then on probably a third of the way around, we're going to do the same again with the next David Austin, and we're going to feed it through and place it out. And then, rather than to separate the whole lot of the roses and the David Austins, we're going to do it slightly different. We're going to bring the third David Austin in through the very top, feed the wire through the hydrangea flower, and we're going to pull it through the bottom so that it's placed still lovely and high, and then you'll find that the flowers will actually fall into place. The next flower we're going to use are the antique roses. And I've chosen these to add that really soft, pretty
and they're a little
feel.
bit vintage.
They are.
And very garden style, because
They
they've got
are.
the petals that just curl back in sharp points. I think with the hydrangeas, overall it just looks a little bit more old school really, and just a little bit more vintage.
And the different flowers we've chosen today all complement each other, so they're not fighting each other in their flower shape or their size. We're going to place up an antique rose onto one side. I'm going to slightly bend the stem underneath so that it actually sits out a little. And then we're going to choose the next one, which is slightly bigger in size, and we're going to pull that one again into the other side, but we're going to place them pretty well next to each other, and we're going to actually slightly pull them down a little bit so that we have like a fuller feel to it. And the last one we're going to bring completely at the opposite side. You might have to juggle them around a little bit, because as you feed each one in, they do tend to slightly push back up again. All of the parafilms you can pull together at the bottom from each of the flower, and once you've got them together in a place where you're happy, and you might have to actually push a little bit from the top, but once you press your parafilms together, they come together tight.
And parafilm likes to
stick.
stick. Yeah,
exactly.
They do. They naturally just likes to stick together. So once you get to that stage, it gets a little bit easier to hold, and then you're just going to do a whip around.
Just do a little whip around the top. You don't have to parafilm these all the way down, but just enough to hold them together firmly.
Because we'll be cutting that anyway. Our vial is only a couple of inches long or so. So we're going to get rid of most of that.
Next.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we don't need to parafilm all of it.
So we're going to cut them roughly about here, because we don't want them too long. So you cut through your wires, and then gently you'll hold them underneath, and you'll place them into the flower cake. So that you'll have to push just very lightly from the top so that it actually sits down. We've also wired some extra David Austins, which we're going to place down the front of the cake. So we're going to place them just at nice angles. So the first one we're going to place into this side, and we're just going to slide it into the cake, because it's only a tiny little bit of wire. We've kept these very, very short because we don't want long wires going into the cake. Then The next one, we're going to do it a slight angle off to the other side, and again just slightly into the cake so that they open up nice and full. We're just going to slightly turn this around so that the David Austin's balance with each cake.
Okay, so now that our cake is complete, we have our finished wedding cake with our beautiful fresh flowers. Now in terms of preparation time, the cake itself, as long as it's not going outside or anything like that in the middle of summer, it can be done in the morning or even the night of. But as far as the fresh flowers go, how much time have we really got?
Depending on the flowers that you use, some flowers don't have a lot of lifespan out of water, so hydrangeas and David Austins especially are fragile flowers, so they do like water, so later the better.
Right, so if we can get it all set up at the venue and then last minute put the flowers, on around maybe ceremony time, that would be fantastic. Well, this has been hopefully a very informative tutorial. I hope that you've learnt a lot, and we look forward to seeing